Hello, this is D.A. Ward, the 30th of March, 2021. Trying to pick up where I left off about a week and a half ago. I was talking about the late William Rathbun, one of my best friends, and companion in many adventures, and a little node of security and accomplishment in the volatile and uncertain period between the late 1960s and the I would say that about 1981 or so, when I finally decided that being a hippie and following migration routes and camping and living off the land, so to speak, although we weren't really living off the land, was probably a dead end. So Bill Rathbun, I think the last thing I talked about was Bill was down in southern Mexico with his equally entertaining and even more daring brother, much older brother, Bob Rathbun. And Bob Rathbun was a friend of mine earlier than Bill was, and because Bob Rathbun and I had somehow gotten thrown together by fate as workers at the Metropolitan Water District in Los Angeles. At the time, they were actively building tunnels through the Tehachapi Mountains and bringing water from the American Canal, that's what they called it, all the way down from the Feather River drainage in Northern California, east slope of the Sierra Nevadas, all the different forks of the Feather River, emptying into a huge earth-filled dam, which which turned out to be a bad engineering idea, because when they had a substantial rainy season 6 or 7 years back, the concrete shell of the earth-filled dam was eaten away by the water spilling over the edge of the dam, and the water proceeded to carve tunnels and gullies and stuff all over the face of the dam in a certain spot, and threatened the town of Oroville, which sits right below the dam, with annihilation, which luckily didn't happen, but only didn't happen because the rain stopped, not because engineering had provided solution for saving the city. Substantial city or town. I don't know, probably 50,000 people. 35,000, 50,000, something like that. As usual, I get carried off on these tangents. So back to Bill. So Bill was camping in Mexico, having forged his own set of friends in the computer industry, recent graduates of University of Colorado at Boulder, and also subject to the same social forces that were going on in Southern California, the introduction of marijuana and LSD and popularization of the same. And pretty much the same thing went on in Colorado on their separate track. So Bill came out to visit his brother, who was traveling in Mexico with his family, totally jobless and living off of, I guess, savings or unemployment, not sure which. And with Bill at that point for a while was his friend Robin, R-O-B-I-N, to differentiate her from R-O-B-Y-N, Robin, and another steadfast friend and an accomplished hippie, married to an artist with a long flowing beard in Nevada City, California, near Nevada City. So Bill was traveling with Bob Ann and the kids, and Robin. I think they had gone down to tried to go down to Oaxaca, the area around Oaxaca, which is in southern Mexico, and got invigorated by the heady fumes of really primitive societies, still Indian tribes living with all their natural herb lore and religion, which involved brujos and brujas, shaman and shame women, I guess you'd say, who were consulted in dire situations of extreme sickness, as in most traditional cultures, and went out to have visions about what the solution might be, and the visions involved taking various psychoactive plants, mainly mushrooms and various couple species of cacti, which they called peyote. So So I tried to explain the free-for-all that was going on as American, young American, college-educated and not travelers, seekers of something beyond the urban and suburban and rural norms, which were pretty pitiful. Very few ways to entertain the fancy and the romanticism and the inbred desire for adventure in young people. A very hidebound Protestant religious upbringing for most of them, having survived along with their communities 3 major wars, or having survived 2 major world wars and a 3rd war ongoing, which was taking place in Southeast Asia, all over Southeast Asia, which we tended to call Vietnam, because that's where the government admitted our soldiers, and that's where the Army set up camp with the intention of ridding the country of people that didn't agree with the capitalistic system, which was faltering and was considered with some derision by the peasant societies who were farming rice and trying to keep their villages above ground, literally, from flooding and government strictures and so Mexico was just teeming with young people. It was led by, not led, but an example was Ken Kesey's Merry Prankster, a commune in northern, in mountains that separate the Central Valley in Oregon from the coastline. Ken Kesey being a novelist, an American novelist, and a practitioner and fervent imbiber of drugs and from marijuana to LSD, especially LSD, and became a kind of a symbol used by the magazines and the media to point to the examples of accomplished tripping, I should say. They gathered themselves, the people around the Oregon house that Ken Kesey owned, gathered themselves and painted an old International Harvester bus and took it on tour to the urban centers in California and Oregon, even down as far as Los Angeles. But mainly Berkeley, California, which is where they stopped for a while and took in the vibes, so to speak, which is a phrase common in those days. So the Merry Pranksters, after the initial Haight-Ashbury be-ins and so forth, decided to take their bus down to Mexico, and they took the bus across the border, I guess, and we're down in Mexico about this time. People from Texas and the farming country there were using the Mexican border, which was kind of porous, as a way to get out of temporary court dates that they had for smoking marijuana, and which was a punishment inordinately heavy for what it was. It could involve tens of years in prison. And any poor young teenaged man or woman who got caught in that trap fled across the border to Mexico, where things were really cheap to live in, and really cheap living, and really easy non-organized police and rules and customs. So parades of long-haired, newly long-haired, growing their hair long, young people from the United States flooded Mexico. I'm not sure of the statistics. Maybe I'm just talking about tens of thousands. Maybe I'm talking about 1 million. I don't know. Somebody should actually try to research that. But and ended up in all the little rural villages where living was easy, and the prices were ridiculously inappropriate to American wallets. When we were down in Porto Angel, Zipolite, areas like that, a beer cost 8 pesos, and a full meal cost 5 pesos, and the peso was worth 8 cents. And people busted their ass to get that money from the American travelers. And pilgrims. And Bill and Bob and Ann and Bob and Ann's 3 young children were pilgrims, and they were part of that scene. And Bill parted ways with Robin, R-O-B-I-N, somewhere around Oaxaca, because she got so stoned and so entranced by this Indian bruja and her mushrooms and the overall surreal landscape of southern Mexico. Just really an amazing place. The color of just the atmosphere, and the way the light is bounced off the plants. warmth, and utter strangeness of plant life made it a really trippy place to be. Trippy being another phrase from those days, meaning a place to get stoned on acid and just sit around and watch the dawn and sit around a campfire at night and then watch the sunrise and take it all in. So Robin got attached to a group of mushroom eating, another group of mushroom eaters, and decided not to travel with Bill anymore, but just to stay there. And Bill, having his remnants of his college education and American gumption is what the previous generation was looking for, and curiosity, sheer curiosity, followed Bob and Ann, who were doing a lot more active kinds of traveling, and they all ended up tenting and camping up the coast of southern Mexico towards the north, working their way north, and I believe, and they got stuck in Puerto, I don't know, a beach somewhere in mid-Mexico, on the Pacific coast side, where the sandflies were so virulent and where their prospects of moving on so limited by, I don't know, economic things or by lack of roads. I'm not sure which. And they were always trying to get off the road and sometimes really succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Ended up seeking refuge in the tent all day long till the dusk, and the sandflies abated. And they had nothing to do, so they began to tell each other stories and write them down. Hi, Rob. Okay. All right. Right. Okay. I brought my kit back from when I used to tune cars in the old-fashioned way. I don't, the compression tester doesn't work, but I've got all the meters and everything, and the remote starter and all of that stuff, which I'll need. Right. Got it. Yep. With the engine warm or cold? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right. I do. I think I've got the little button thing. I think that's part of my kit. I could, you clip it to the terminals down on the starter. It should work. So it'll have to be cold, right? Okay. All right, I'll tell you what's going on. All right. Yeah, bye. So they wrote about all the strange people that they met on their couple months of travel up to that point. They wrote about it and what all the crazy things that were going on, and a little bit about what the terrain was like and what the people were doing, and oftentimes what the villagers were doing. And they finally made it out of Mexico, got out of, I think it was Penasco, I'm not sure, got off the beach there. When they got off that beach, they had a penciled in manuscript, and it was about 90 or 100 pages worth of stories of traveling in Mexico at the height of the Flower Children era. And the first thing they did when they got to the border, of course, Bob had been living with his aunt and the kids in Manhattan Beach for his latest job at the water district, where he knew a 19-year-old junior clerk, just fresh out of high school with 1 year of college at USC, but fleeing the fraternity I got myself entangled in, and now registered at UCLA to decompress. Oh, and to decompress, I took this job at the water district, supposedly just over the summer, but it ended up being 3/4 of the year I stayed there. Took UCLA evening courses, and then entered the university itself. I don't know, in the spring quarter of 1969, something like that. Spring 1969. So I was a working stiff, and a denizen of Los Angeles, and that's where they logically would have stopped, because there was somebody to camp, whose living room they could camp in. You know, everybody was that wild. But in the meantime, I had been this is after I quit the water district by a couple of years, and I had been attending UCLA and had gotten to the end of my had gotten into my senior year, so it must have been 3 years or 2.5 years after this, and ran afoul of the draft, which was ongoing, and the fields of Vietnam were being littered with blown-up teenage single males in their uniforms and boots, and an absolutely inconsequential thing that they didn't even term a war, officially a war. It was just, and it was the height of doublespeak and political disaster in the United States, and involved the youngest generation. We're going out to get blown to pieces, and we just rebelled. And I rebelled, and of course we had a big protest at UCLA, and they shut down the college, the university, for the entire spring quarter of 1969 because of the protests against Kent State, where our militia, our National Guardsmen had killed students, shooting them at a great distance with rifles aimlessly into the crowd. That was, not what we were taught in school. Was the perfect ideal of liberty and freedom. It was, in fact, the act of a repressive government. And of course, I wasn't going to Vietnam because I was furious with the government and untrusted, untrustful toward anything it did, even the good things, if it was doing good things in those days. And so I declared conscientious objectorship and went before a draft board that turned out to be pussycats, but in many cases had jailed people who claimed that they didn't believe in taking up arms and killing other people out in Vietnam. So I'd gotten my conscientious objectorship, all of which Bob and Bill and everybody in the tent camps in Mexico had missed, and moved to Berkeley, California, because that's where I found a job working in a hospital for alternate service to do something for the war effort, but not be armed and blow people to pieces and get blown up. So I was working in a town of Pinole, just north of Berkeley, and on the inland side of the bay, the Great San Francisco Bay complex. And with my girlfriend, Messiah, who I had met and partied with, and become a lover of. She actually had 2 or 3 different lovers at the time. Back when I was still working for the Water District. Well, I'd moved in with her, and the 2 of us moved to Berkeley and got a flat, one of those old Victorian, skinny Victorian houses, like in San Francisco almost, in Berkeley. And we had the whole upper floor. And so they traveled north to Berkeley and camped in our living room. All 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. Bill and Bob and Ann and their 3 kids. And they stayed there for several months while I worked at the hospital, leaving in the early morning and coming back about dark. While they sat around on the floor, rented an IBM Selectric typewriter, and typed the manuscript that they'd written in pencil and elaborated on it into a book called Get the Buzz On. It was an early manifestation of the counterculture and one of the prime sources of what people were up to in those days. And it's now, if there is, we sold 10,000 copies, and it's on eBay now for hundreds of dollars. A single copy of that book. At one point, I was in southern Florida, Key West, and stayed with this woman who was a former mayor of Gainesville. You know, the hippies not only settled in Mexico, they went as far south as they could in the United States and settled around Homestead, Florida, and down in the Florida Keys. And this woman, in the Abby Hoffman Thumb Your Nose at Authority vein in those days, ran for mayor of Gainesville, and all the people there who were not all the crazies who had settled in Florida for generations voted her in, made her mayor of Gainesville for about 6 months or something until it became impractical. I think she didn't have an address or something. They kicked her out some bureaucratic way or another. Anyway, she was down in Key West living in a conch house, which is where the conch divers boarded. Conch was a big selling item in the 1900s. It's a the conch shell is the thing that you see the warriors blowing in old Hawaiian films, Polynesian movies of the 1930s and 40s. And she lived in the unenclosed attic, which was just the eaves and the roof, and the two ends were open to the air. She had a hammock up in there, and so I came up to occupy her hammock occasionally. And she had 3 books that she considered the prime references to her lifestyle, and they were the Bible, the I Ching, and the 3rd book was Get the Buzz On. And I told her, well, that was made in our apartment in Berkeley. And so this ends the story because it's time for me to go to work. Second episode of Bill Rathbun, tribute to Bill Rathbun. And I'll continue it as soon as I get the chance. This is D.A. Ward, the 30th of March, 2021, signing off.